Hi there, this is Kevin Patton with a brief audio introduction to episode number 35 of the A&P Professor podcast, also known as TAPP Radio, an audio happening for teachers of human anatomy and physiology and related courses. In episode 35, I have some news about how smell relates to stress and some news about how oxytocin works. And I'm going to discuss something about the value of cholesterol testing for cardiovascular risk. And the featured topic is big ideas, that is the essential concepts of A&P. Well, it's time once again for word dissections, and unbelievably, the first word we're going to dissect this time is dissection. That is the word dissection. I'm going to start off with asking a question about its pronunciation. You know how I pronounce it, dissection, but a lot of people pronounce it as dissection. And I'm going to swing back around to that question in a minute, but first let's do our dissection or dissection. The first word part is dis, D-I-S, and that means apart. The second word part is S-E-C-T, or sect, and that means cut. And then, of course, the last part, shun, means a process. So you put that all together, dissection is a process of cutting apart, which makes sense, right? Because that's what we do when we dissect, we cut things apart. Coming back around to that question, how do you pronounce it? I think there's a really strong case to be made that the correct pronunciation of that word is dissection, because the first word part is dis, not dice or even die. Now, there is a word part that we could use in some terms that is die, D-I. It could mean two, for example. But that's not the word part we're using here. The word part we're using here is dis, and we don't normally pronounce that as dice. So it makes sense that dissection would be the correct pronunciation. However, as we've discussed in previous episodes, sometimes what starts out as a mispronunciation or a misunderstanding-based pronunciation becomes part of the mainstream. And I think we can say that dissection is correct on that basis. That is, that it has become part of the mainstream. So I wouldn't say it's incorrect to say dissection, but I think there's a stronger case for pronouncing it dissection. Now, something else related to this term that I wanted to bring up is that in the previous episode, episode 34, we talked about ways that we can make dissection activities in our class work a little better. And in that discussion, I was discussing planes of the body, like mid-sagittal plane, for example, and sections, such as a mid-sagittal section. And I discovered that when I was doing my editing, that I swapped them. I wasn't using them correctly. And I fixed it in the editing. So if it sounds a little funny when you're listening to that section, it's because I had to drop in planes where there was section and section where there was planes. Because a plane is something that is imaginary. It's sort of an imaginary flat surface that we can imagine is cutting a sheep brain, for example, in half one way or the other, or in third, or wherever it is, on an oblique, and it could be an oblique plane. And so a plane is sort of like what direction we're cutting in. The section is the cut itself. And I had swapped them. And I said that I was cutting a mid-sagittal plane or something like that. I don't remember exactly what I was saying. But I cut along a plane, but I'm cutting a section. I'm making a section. Let's put it that way, because that's kind of redundant to say cut a section. I'm cutting a cut. But my point is that we do need to be careful about how we use planes and sections. And I thought I was being careful, but when I look back, I wasn't. So let's try to analyze the way we're talking about it in our classes, because you can't go back and fix it in audio editing when you're in a live class. I guess you can in a flipped class, but not in a live class. Another word that I want to dissect is the word concept, which we'll be using a lot in the full episode coming up here. So concept starts with the word part con, C-O-N, and that means with. And then the second part of the word is sept, C-E-P-T, and that is really a shortened form of a Latin word, which is septus. And that refers to something seized or taken or brought along. So when we put con together with sept, we're putting together things we've taken. And so that fits in with the actual working definition that we use in English for concept, and that is it's an idea of something that's formed by combining all the facts that you know about it. So we're seizing or taking those facts and putting them together with each other. So concept. Our third and last word that we're going to dissect is gradient, which I'm also going to be talking about in the next episode. And we're all familiar with that term. We use it a lot in our explanations of A&P, don't we? And yet, even though it's an ordinary English word, as was the word concept, we can still break it apart into its word parts, and that can kind of help us understand better what it is. So in gradient, the first part is grade, G-R-A-D, and that literally means to walk or take a step. So grade often refers to things that are stepwise. After grade comes I, the letter I, and that doesn't mean anything. That's just a combining vowel. And then the last word part is ent, E-N-T, which means a state. So gradient is a state of something being stepwise. So for example, when we talk about a concentration gradient, we mean that at one end of our scenario, the concentration is at one value, and then it either increases or decreases stepwise as you get toward the other end of that scenario. Or we could talk about a pressure gradient and say that the pressure is one value at this end of the situation, and it's a different value at the other end of the situation, and it graduates. That is, it increases or decreases in a stepwise fashion as we move from one end to the other. So gradient, it's a stepwise state of concentration or a stepwise state of pressure or of light or of color or almost anything, right, that can be graded. Oh, wait, I forgot one. I said gradient was the last one, but I have one more. So we're just going to call this one a bonus word dissection, okay? And it's probably the most complex one. So it's a double bonus word dissection. And the word is apolipoprotein B. Yeah, that's right. Say that 10 times real fast. Apolipoprotein B, apolipoprotein B. Okay, I'm not going to do that. So let's break it apart. Apo, the first part, means away or off of or apart. And then the second part, lipo, L-I-P-O, means fat, literally. And then the last part, well, we can take two parts together and call that protein. But protein, in turn, is made up of two word parts. The prote part, which means first order or primary, and then the second part is IN, the IN ending, which just is an ending that refers to a substance. So protein is a first order or primary substance. That's what that literally means. So a lipoprotein is a molecule that is a combination of a lipid and a protein, or lipids and proteins. And we know that lipids and proteins form particles of various sizes that float around in our bloodstream that include cholesterol. And when you take the protein part away or consider it separately, then that's where the apo part comes in. That is, an apolipoprotein is the protein part of the lipoprotein. And so that's what an apolipoprotein is. But what about that B hanging off there at the end? Well, B refers to the fact that it's in the B class of apolipoproteins. There are actually 7 classes that have been identified. They are A, B, C, D, E, H, and L. And so apolipoprotein B is from the B class of apolipoproteins. This preview podcast is sponsored by HAPS, the Human Anatomy and Physiology Society, promoting excellence in the teaching of human anatomy and physiology for over 30 years. Go visit HAPS at theapprofessor.org/HAPS. That's HAPS. Elaine Marieb, retired A&P professor and author of several popular A&P textbooks and lab manuals, once said, "Education gave me the faith and confidence I have in myself, and I would love to help instill that faith in students pursuing careers in health professions. Be diligent in your studies, because only when you are can you gain the sense of accomplishment that brings confidence in yourself. With confidence and education, you can change your life." Elaine was one of the first people I met at my first HAPS meeting, and we continued to have brief chats over the years, mostly as we sat together as early arrivals waiting for the venue to open before the annual banquet at each HAPS conference, drink tickets in hand. She always seemed to have some powerful and often wickedly funny bit of advice for me about the business of writing textbooks. I'm sad to say that Elaine Marieb died on December 20th of 2018 in Naples, Florida, at the age of 82. Cheers, Elaine. Well, I have another recommendation from the A&P Professor Book Club. And this one is a book I'm going to talk a little bit more about in the full episode, but here's a little preview here. It's titled The Core Concepts of Physiology, A New Paradigm for Teaching Physiology, and is put together by a group of people headed up by Joel Michael, William Cliff, Jenny McFarland, Harold Modell, and Ann Wright. And it's published on behalf of APS, the American Physiological Society, by Springer, which is a major publisher. And I have links in the show notes and at the episode page where you can acquire this book. But I want to clarify that a little bit. One of the links I give you is to a page at the American Physiological Society website. And if you are a member and you're logged in as a member of APS, you can download this book for free. The other link that I give you is to Amazon, where you can purchase the hard copy of the book. And looking at the recent price on Amazon for the book, if you're not a member of APS, it might be worth joining just to get this book, because depending on what level of membership you join at, it's close to being a wash if you do that. And so you get the book and the membership is very valuable. I've been a member of APS for a long, long time, and I get a lot of value out of it. Not only from the physiological journals that they publish and information coming out of their various meetings and the networking that I'm able to do, but they have a journal called Advances in Physiological Education, which is fantastic. And it's got a lot of information in there about some of the various teaching principles that we've talked about on the podcast and many more. And a lot of studies showing how they can be applied and what works best, and just all kinds of ideas. And it's not strictly physiology. There's a lot of information in there about the A&P course as well. So it's worth checking into. But getting back to this book, this book came out of a project where they were looking at this whole idea of the basic concepts of biology, and they took it in the direction of human physiology. And they sort of boiled everything down into 15 core concepts. And they include things like evolution, homeostasis, causality, energy, and so on. And I get into those a little bit more in the full episode, but you can look in the show notes. I have them listed there as well. And then it goes into how that approach to teaching physiology, or in our cases, we're teaching mostly anatomy and physiology combined, it can be applied that way as well. And it really is a very interesting and useful take on how we approach the whole story of the human body, of structure and function of the human body. So it's really recommended that you at least read parts of that book to kind of see the idea that they're going through. And it's very well done. So I think that you're really going to enjoy going through it. A searchable transcript and a captioned audiogram of this preview episode are funded by AAA, the American Association of Anatomists, at anatomy.org. Well, this is Kevin Patton signing off until our next episode, and reminding you to keep your questions and comments coming. Why not call the podcast hotline right now at 1-833-LION-DEN. That's 1-833-546-6336. Or visit us at theapprofessor.org. See you next time.